Hi everyone, welcome back to the History of Football channel. Today I'll be doing another rivalry video. I'll be talking about a rivalry in English football and the history about that rivalry. Before, I've done the Black Country Derby, and the first one I did was the East Anglian Derby. But tonight I'm going to be talking about the Manchester Derby, Manchester City against Manchester United. So like I've done in previous videos, just a bit of background on both teams. Manchester City were founded in 1880 as St Mark's in brackets West Garton. They later became Ardwick Association Football Club in 1887, and in 1894 they became Manchester City. As for Manchester United, they were founded in 1878 as Newton Heath, Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Football Club, and they had that name for quite a while until on the 24th of April 1902 they changed their name to Manchester United. The first time that these two sides ever met was on the 12th of November 1881 when Manchester City, known as St Mark's West Garton back then, played against Newton Heath. The match would finish 3-0 in favour of Newton Heath, and the match was described as a pleasant game by the Ashton reporter. The pair would become the dominant teams in the Manchester area. The winner of the Manchester Cup was either Newton Heath or Ardwick, later known as Manchester City, every year between 1888 to 1893. Both teams would later join the Football Alliance, which was a short-lived rival to the Football League. After a few unsuccessful attempts to gain election to the Football League itself, both teams were finally admitted in 1892, with Newton Heath joining the First Division and Ardwick joining the new Second Division. The first Football League meeting between these two clubs came in the 1894-95 season. Newton Heath beat Manchester City 5-2 at Hyde Road. The two clubs would have to wait until 1906 to have their first ever meeting against each other in the top division, which Manchester City won 3-0. In the early days of the Manchester Derby, the two sides played each other quite infrequently. Between 1915 to 1948, the clubs only met on 10 occasions. The longest gap between meetings would be 10 years. On the 9th of January 1937, Manchester City defeated Manchester United 1-0. It wouldn't be until the 20th of September 1947 that these two sides would meet again, with the match finishing 0-0 at Main Road. The sides would meet more frequently during the 1950s and 60s. Manchester derbies in the 1970s saw two controversial incidents. In the December 1970 derby, a tackle by United's George Best broke the leg of City's Glyn Pardoe. The severity of the injury almost resulted in the Manchester City defender losing his leg. The following year, the two clubs played out an entertaining 3-3 draw, with Francis Lee of Manchester City accusing George Best of diving, and he made the point by throwing himself to the ground in front of the referee. In the 1973-1974 season, the two clubs would meet on the final day of that season. Manchester United went into the match desperate for a win as to avoid relegation to the Second Division. After 80 minutes there was no score until Francis Lee played a ball towards former Manchester United player Dennis Law, who was standing with his back to goal. Law backheeled the ball past goalkeeper Alex Stepner into the net. This was Dennis Law's last appearance in league football. He announced his retirement soon after. In the closing minutes of the match, United supporters invaded the pitch and forced an abandonment. However, the result stood, with Manchester City winning 1-0, and other results meant that Manchester United would have still been relegated if the match had ended in a United win or a draw. By the 1986-87 season, Manchester City were relegated to the Second Division. It was around this time as well that Ron Atkinson was replaced by Sir Alex Ferguson as manager of Manchester United. The first two matches that Alex Ferguson managed against Manchester City both ended in Manchester United wins, the first being a 1-0 victory in the FA Cup, followed by a 2-0 victory in the league. The 1980s would end on a high note for Manchester City though, as they won promotion back to the First Division in 1989, and they played against Manchester United on the 23rd of September 1989, just weeks into the season. Manchester City defeated Manchester United 5-1. However, this would be the last win over their bitter rivals for 13 years. During the 1990s, Manchester United dominated the Premier League, and as a result, Manchester City's matches against them never really ended in their favour. There were 7 matches played during the 1990s in the Premier League, and Manchester United were undefeated in all of those, with Manchester City only getting 3 draws. It should also be noted around this time as well, Manchester City reached probably the lowest point in club history when they were relegated to the 3rd division for the only time in their history, but they managed to fight their way back into the Premier League. In April 2001, the first meeting between the two clubs in 3 years saw the culmination of a long-standing feud between Roy Keane and Alfie Haaland, which Keane received a red card for after making a knee-high challenge on Haaland. In his autobiography, published in 2002, Keane admitted that the challenge was a premeditated attempt to injure, an admission which resulted in a £150,000 fine and a 5-match playing ban during the autumn of that year. On the 9th of November 2002, Manchester City won the last derby played at Main Road, winning 3-1. It was Manchester City's first victory over United since 1989. Sean Gota scored 2 goals, his 100th and 101st goals for the club, and Nicholas Anelka scored the other. In the return fixture, Manchester City would draw 1-1 with Manchester United. This was the first time in over 10 years that Manchester City had gone in both league fixtures without losing against Manchester United. In the first ever derby match played at the new ground that Manchester City called home, they would defeat Manchester United 4-1, with the scorers being Robbie Fowler, John Macken, Trevor Sinclair and Sean Wright-Phillips. On the 10th of February 2008, 4 days after the 50th anniversary of the Munich air disaster, Manchester City would win 2-1 at Old Trafford, with Darius Vassell and Benjani scoring for City. It was the first time since April 1974 that Manchester City had beaten United in the league at Old Trafford, and the first time they had won both derby games since the 1969-1970 season. Controversy was generated prior to the start of the 2009-2010 season when Manchester City signed Carlos Tevez after his contract with United ended, and erected a billboard reading "Welcome to Manchester" at the top of Deansgate. The billboard provoked Alex Ferguson into claiming City were a small club with a small mentality, and subsequently called them the noisy Neighbours during that season. During the 2009-2010 season, the two clubs played some of the best Manchester derbies of all time, with Sir Alex Ferguson himself saying that the derby where Manchester United won 4-3 was probably the best Manchester derby of all time. Michael Owen scored the winner in the 95th minute to win the match 4-3. The match was voted the greatest Premier League game at the Premier League 20 Seasons Awards in 2012. In the 2010-2011 season, the two sides would meet each other 3 times, with Manchester United winning their match at Old Trafford through a spectacular bicycle kick by Wayne Rooney, which is a goal that's been replayed over and over again. The two sides would also meet in the FA Cup semi-final, which Manchester City won over United. They would eventually reach the final and beat Stoke City 1-0 to lift their first trophy since 1976. On the 23rd of October 2011, Manchester City would beat Manchester United 6-1 at Old Trafford, with Mario Balotelli getting a goal and then subsequently pulling his shirt over his head, which revealed a message on the t-shirt underneath saying, "Why always me?" The 6-1 score was the biggest defeat suffered by Manchester United against City at Old Trafford since the 5-0 loss in 1955. It was also the first time since 1926 that City had scored 6 at Old Trafford. On the final day of the 2011-2012 season, both clubs were going for the Premier League title. Manchester United managed to win their match against Sunderland at the Stadium of Light, and then nervously looked on to see whether they were going to be league champions. However, Manchester City would pull off an incredible comeback against Queen's Park Rangers with Aguero scoring the winning goal. Manchester City would win their first league title since the 1967-68 season and leave Manchester United fans heartbroken. In the 2023 FA Cup final, it was the first time in history that a Manchester derby had been featured in a cup final, which Manchester City would go on to win 2-1 on the 3rd of June 2023. Manchester City's İlkay Gündoğan would score the fastest ever FA Cup goal in the history of the competition after he scored 12 seconds into the game. Manchester City would win the final 2-1 with İlkay Gündoğan scoring both goals and Bruno Fernandes getting the penalty in the 33rd minute for Manchester United. The next scheduled meeting between these two sides is happening very soon. On the 2nd of March 2024, Manchester City will host Manchester United in the Premier League. Overall, there's been 191 meetings in the Manchester derby. Manchester United have the most wins with 78. The player with the most appearances is Ryan Giggs with 36, and the top goal scorer is Wayne Rooney with 11. The all-time results are Manchester City 60 wins, there's been 53 draws, and Manchester United have won 78 games. The biggest score in the Manchester derby in terms of a victory is 6-1, which Manchester City achieved on 2 occasions, in 1926 and 2011. They've also beaten Manchester United 5-0 in 1955, and in 1994 Manchester United beat City 5-0. The most goals scored in an actual match between these two sides is 9. This came in 2022 when Manchester City beat United 6-3. The longest win streak in the derby is held by Manchester United. They won 8 consecutive games between 1993 to 2000. The longest unbeaten streak is Manchester United, 16 matches between 1990 to 2001. In terms of players that have played for both teams, even though this derby is well over 130-year-old, there isn't too many players that have crossed the divide, as you will, but some of the names that you might know: Dennis Law, as I've previously mentioned, Brian Kidd, Peter Barnes, Peter Schmeichel, Andy Cole, Carlos Tevez, Owen Hargreaves and Andrei Kanchelskis. They've all played for Manchester City and Manchester United. And there have been 3 players that have actually played for one of the Manchester clubs and then gone on to manage the other team. So Sir Matt Busby played for Manchester City, then obviously he went on to manage Manchester United to great fame, and also Steve Coppell and Mark Hughes both played for Manchester United, but then they would go on to manage Manchester City in their managerial careers. So that is my video on the Manchester derby. These are 2 clubs that are not too far away from each other. Both their grounds are only separated by 4 miles, or if you're outside England, 6.4 kilometres. They're also 2 of the most successful clubs in the world. If you combine both the honours of United and City, they've won over 100 trophies. The Manchester derby is always a game that I look forward to. If I ever get a chance to watch them, I do. It's one of the, I'd say, top 5 derbies in England. But let me know in the comment section below, if you're a Manchester United fan, do you consider Liverpool to still be the bigger rival, even with all the success of Manchester City? Or do you consider Manchester City to be the main rival? With history of football as well, I've recently hit 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. Thanks to everyone that's recently subscribed to the channel, and to everyone that's been following me since the start of the channel, thank you very much. I've got more videos coming out in the future. Hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. But anyways, I'm going to get on out of here, and I'll catch us all later in the next video. Alright, take me bye for now.